Hi everyone. Today we are going to start a new topic that is iterations. Well, a very quick review about what we learned last lecture, and we talk about two very important concepts in behind the scene of the functions, and their abstraction and decomposition. And the abstraction means that if we want to consider a function as a black box, and then we only care about two things: what's the input and then what's the output. As long as we know the input and the output, and then we don't need to really unbox this function and see what's really inside, because with the input and output, and we should be able to use that function, and in most of the cases it should be good enough. And the second part is decomposition, and decomposition is a process that we want to break down a big problem into several smaller problems, and then we can attack one small problem at one time. And we also spend a lot of time talking about the namespaces. And for the namespace, it means that the scope where a variable name stays valid. Okay, and we have a global scope and then a local scope. And the local scope means that we create some of the variables inside a function definition. And long story short, the namespace rules are: number one, if you in the global scope, and then you can access in the local scope, you can access the variables defined in the global scope, but you cannot change them. And in the global scope, you cannot access the variables defined in the local scope. Okay, so those are the two important rules you have to remember. And today we are going to enter a new topic: the loops, the iteration, and we also need to talk about the ranges. Okay, and what is a loop? And there are two looping structures in Python, but they also one purpose. That is to allow a piece of code to run again and again and again. We may know how many runs we want to run, or we don't necessarily know that, but either case, that's fine. We want to have a part of the code which can be run repeatedly. Okay, and we have the for loop, and then we also have a while loop. So those are two major types of the iterations in Python. And this is the for loop. So the syntax for the for loop is: so for, and then there is a member, or usually we call that a control variable, and in some of the object. So for each of the member in a sequenced object, and then you see the colon, right? So when you see the colon, you know that you are going to start a iteration, and then it will be indented. So this part of the code will be considered as the body of the for loop. And then you will see there's also an else. This is confusing, and this is really one of the part of the Python I really believe should be removed. In the if, and then we have the else, and after a for loop, we can also add the else. And the rule for the else is: after we have run all the possible iterations possible, and then we don't have any issue with running all the possible iterations, and then we will go into the else. Okay, so and before we move on and see more examples, there is one more thing we have to see. That is the range. Okay, and for the range, we can define a range in different ways. And if you want to say range, and then you define where to stop, and then you are gonna have a range of the integers starting from 0, and then you are gonna stop at the stop point you specify, but the stop point will be excluded. Okay, and then so from 0 to the stop point with the stop point excluded, and that is range with one parameter. And then if you want to specify two parameters, and you can tell where to start and where to stop. And the rule is, for the start point, that is included, and for the stop point, that is excluded. Okay, so let me write some code for you guys. Okay, I want to copy this one, and then I want to make it day 9. And then say if you want to have my range equals range 10. Okay, so and then if I want to do a print of my range, and then well, if I run that, and you will see it doesn't tell you what are the numbers inside. It only tells you it is a range from 0 to 10. So 0 by default is the start point, and then I told the range that I'm going to stop at 10, right? So but the problem is I don't see how many numbers are inside and what are those numbers. And one of the trick I tell you in the lecture notes is that I want to force the range into a list. So I have the range, I force it into a list, and then I'm printing not the range but a list. So I'm using a casting here. I'm forcing a range to be a list. And of course, we haven't talked about the list yet. That is a data type we are going to talk a lot in later of this course, probably in the second half of the semester. Okay, so if I run this again, and you will see, okay, now I see the numbers from 0 to 9, right? From 0 to 9. So by default, I start at 0, and then the 10 is the stop point, and the 10 is excluded. Okay, now I want to make some changes. I want to do from 5 comma 10. Okay, and then I'm going to stop at 5. 5 is included, and then I'm going to stop at 10, and 10 is excluded. So if I want to run this again, and I'm going to have 5, 6, 7, 8, and 9, I don't have 10 because 10 is excluded. Okay, so let me come back. Well, you see, this is a trick I did. Well, if you have a range 4, and then you cast it into a list and make a print, and you will have 0, 1, 2, and 3. You don't have 4. And if you have the range 1, 5, and then you start at 1 and you stop at 5, but you don't have 5, you stop really at 4. Okay, so here are some of the exercises. How can we create a range of integers from 1 to 10? So 1 to 10, including 1, including 10. And how do we do that? Well, starting at 1, right? So you can't do A or B because A or B, they start at 0. So C and D, which one is correct? The answer is D. The reason is, well, remember the start point 1 is included, and then 11, the end point, is excluded. So, well, if you exclude 11, you're really going to stop at 10, and including 10. So D is the right answer. So, well, if you have this one, and how many numbers are there in this range? So you have 1 to 10. So there are a total of 10 values, right? Okay, and the next part. If you have a positive integer n, and how many numbers are there in range n? So you have to think about that. We know that n is a positive number. And then if we have the range n, what are the values inside? We have from 0 to 1, 2, 3, and we stop at n minus 1, right? From 0 to n minus 1. So the answer is there are a total of n different values from 0 to n minus 1, a total of n values. Okay, and then since we have already got the range, and then we want to go back because we want to practice this syntax. So, well, I'm gonna put a range here because I want to visit a range of values. Okay, so for a member in a range, and that is the thing we're gonna do next. Okay, so if I want to do for I, well, and you may ask why this is an I there. Well, this I is just a control variable. We are going to use I as a variable to visit all the members in this range. So that range is 4, so 0, 1, 2, and 3, right? So if I want to do for I in the range of 4, and then in the first round, and I will be 0. The second round, I is 1, and then the third round, I is 2, and then the fourth round, I is a 3. Okay, so how about I just write it down here? I can do for I in range 4. And then I'm doing nothing more than printing the value. Okay, and as I said, the first round I is 0, the second round I is 1, and then I is 3, I is 2, I is 3. Okay, so I'm gonna have from 0, 1, 2, and 3. Okay, so there are a total of 4 rounds, and for each round, I'm using I to visit a member in the range of 4. Okay, and if I want to do this one for x in the range of 10, and the process will be similar, and I'm gonna have I'm gonna do a print and then hyphen hyphen, and then multiply 10 times, and then I'm gonna do for x in range 10. And then if I want to do something like print x is comma and then x. Okay, so for each round I'm using I to visit one member in the range 10, and then for each round I'm printing x is and then the current value of the x. Okay, so let me run this again, and I'm gonna start from x equals 0, x is 1, x is 2, x is 3, and eventually I'm gonna have x is 9. So for each of the round, I'm gonna use the x to visit one member in the range of 10. Okay, so well, before I move on, let me ask this. So if I have the range 4, how many rounds are we gonna run this iteration? So for I in range 4, and then how many rounds are we going to run this iteration? The answer is 4, because, well, in the range 4 we have 0, 1, 2, and 3, so a total of 4 values, and then we are going to use x to visit each of the member in the range 4, so there are total of 4 rounds. And how about this one? So for x in range 10, and then how many rounds are we going to run this iteration? The answer is 10. The reason is for this range 10, we have from 0 to 9. So a total of 10 different values. So we are going to run this iteration for 10 rounds. Okay, so I guess this video is long enough and I want to stop here, and later we are going to move on and I'm going to write more code to show you how to do the iterations. And for this lecture, and especially, I want to encourage you guys to pause the videos and then write the code with me. Okay, you have to write the code with me, and if you just watch me doing the coding and listening to my blah blah blah, and that's okay, but that's not the best way to learn a language. Okay, I will see you in the next video.